Alright, so this Berserk episode was actually... It was alright. It was alright. Last week's episode, if you see my review, I honestly did not like the last week's episode of Berserk. It was just... like, there was a lot of sequences of the animation that felt really off-putting, which really kind of ruined the immersion of the episode for me. I mean, when it comes down to this overall adaptation of Berserk, there's really not that much immersion to go down entirely with it. But, I mean, still, like, there were several scenes in which I personally was put off by. However, it seems that, though, there are actually some of you out there who thought that the episode was actually really, really good, and probably the best episode that we had yet of this series of Berserk. But I highly disagreed with that factor, and for that I got a lot of flack. Apparently I got, like, a lot of dislikes from my last week's episode review of Berserk just because of my opinion differs from yours. So, I mean, you know, it's whatever. I'm a reviewer. This stuff is bound to happen and whatnot. I mean, I'm just being honest. And while there were some inconsistencies with this episode as well, I think that this episode actually was a whole lot better, and probably one of the better episodes, like you guys have stated before. Like, this episode, honestly, I thought was probably one of the better episodes that we have gotten from this adaptation, and just how everything went down, it didn't really seem, you know, rushed. You know, the movements and everything seemed fine. The only thing that I can really remember from this episode that really looked bad is when we had Casca friggin' fall off of the church and Farnese, you know, technically held out her hand and plunged into the water with her, but you kind of see, like, the two just kind of, like, standing in still motion as, like, the background is, you know, showing them falling down. If you get what I'm saying, where how it kind of like looks like the background is moving to make it seem like they are falling, but instead their animations, their character animations, they're not falling. They're just completely still as the backdrop is, you know, making them seem like they are falling. Like, that looks really off-putting. But other than that, this episode was fine. I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, there were actually several scenes where we saw the ogre battle and also the kelpie battle, which I still can't get over that freaking frog-like, horse-like creature thing. Like, when I saw that in the manga, I'm just like, what the fuck? Kentaro Miura, like, what? This looks completely different from the creatures that you have shown us previously in the series of Berserk. This one looks innocent, but yet so devastating, you know? And when you see this whole fight go about between the Kelpie and Serpico and Guts and the Ogre, like, those honestly were pretty hype, I gotta say. More so with, you know, Guts' side as he is slashing and tearing through this shit, like, as, you know, Shireki has the whole magic field all over, you know, the whole village, or technically the church, since everyone has pretty much sheltered at the church, you know, while Guts and Serpico and everyone else takes on the monsters and whatnot. Like, during those moments, that was where the hype was truly showing within the episode. Just seeing these two go all at it, giving it their all for this entire village. It was just really cool to see the amount of teamwork that was being involved. I mean, sure, they weren't, you know, fighting off the same opponent, but they were fighting off, you know, each of their own given targets. You know, Serpico fighting off the Kelpie, Guts fighting off the Ogre, and while they weren't really communicating between one another, you could tell that the teamwork of the two, you know, doing their part in order to protect the village, the surrounding residents within it, you know, you could tell that they were doing their best, and they were actually, you know, technically cooperating with each other, because, you know, that's what we have been seeing throughout, you know, this later half of the 2017 version of Berserk, because previously Serpico and Guts were kind of like mortal enemies to a certain extent, and I mean, in a certain way, they probably don't trust, you know, each other as they do. And getting on to the trust topic, I wanted to talk about Guts. From what we see at the end of this episode as well, it does seem like Guts is actually putting a lot of trust and faith into his comrades now, and that is something that we never have seen with Guts before, you know, or at least, you know, after the Golden Age arc. Of course, you know, he had, you know, a family, so to speak, with his fellow comrades of the Band of the Hawk until everything went to utter shit. But And that's why Guts technically lost his trust in people, and why he's so angry is because, one, he is concerned about his own safety, and he does not want to get, hurt or even killed. That's why he really does not put his trust in anyone, but also at the same factor, he doesn't want to put his trust or loyalty into others, and he doesn't want them to put the loyalty and trust into him as well, because being around Guts in general can get you killed. And that's what we have been seeing throughout the whole entire series of Berserk, especially what happened with, Farnese and Serpico. Ever since they joined the team, they have demons coming about them. Sure, it was up to, Serpico and Farnese's choice, and that's what Guts said. He said, if you join me, then just be prepared for a night of living hell, so to speak. Because that's what Guts and Casca have to live with. And, it just shows you within this, episode that Guts' trust is actually starting to develop. Sure, he still believes that he can get people killed in the process, but to a certain extent, it does seem like with his new comrades that he has along his journey, he is actually, caring about them to a certain extent and believe in them. He even puts enough loyalty and trust into Farnese in order to take care of Casca. So, I mean, that's cool to see, and especially at the end of this episode, we saw how proud of Guts was of Shireki, the witch, giving her compliments and everything. It's almost like you see Guts as a totally different person within this, arc that we are in, but later we will see other stuff that happens and whatnot. But regarding that one moment, I was so like, damn. I was like, damn. They really hit the nail on that. So in this episode, you can kind of say that Guts got some characterization within this episode as well. I mean, but at the same time, it's been very subtle characterization regarding his character. So technically, we've been seeing little bit and little bit by his overall character development throughout, his journey in general, since the beginning of the series all the way up till now, especially when it comes to even his negative emotions, how his inner demons are starting to take control over him. Like, even that is some characterization for his overall character as well. And just the stuff he has been through, it's just kind of cool. No matter how subtle the characterization might be, it's still characterization, and I'm kind of glad that they're actually showcasing that. Now, when it came down to this overall episode in general, we obviously got to see the whole ogre and kelpie battle scenes with the trolls and whatnot, but mainly this overall episode was to show us the power of magic and what Shireki is actually capable of, which Shireki is actually a very pivotal character within the story of Berserk. I personally believe that she actually plays a very big role into the series, and from what we saw in this episode, you can definitely tell that she is definitely going to be a very valuable asset to the story. And also, she also is teaching Guts, Serpico, and the rest of the gang about the astral world, which is where the demons are at, how they're entering in through the physical world. It was just so cool seeing how powerful the magic in the Berserk-verse is, and how powerful it can be to pretty much, destroy any obstacle within its path. Depending on the user, of course. We do know that Shireki is a pretty, knowledgeable wizard, when it comes to her overall magic ability. However, she still stated that her emotions get the better of her, and she is still technically in the beginning stages. She's been doing this for years, but she even has a lot to learn from as well. And also, she even states that, technically anyone can actually learn magic within, the world and whatnot. It takes many years and whatnot, but anyone can do at least some form of little magic. It just depends on how, far you're willing to go into your training. Also, something that I needed to state within this review is something that I personally found really funny within the episode. I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but when you see Shireki and Serpico and everyone else on the church as they are looking down at Guts, versing the ogre, and then when the kelpie is, you know, coming through the area, and Serpico decides to actually take on the Kelpie for himself. Like, when they're all up on the church, and you see, like, Shireki freaking out, and she's tilting her head and everything, and she has her little fairy on top of it. I don't know if it was just me, but when the camera angle came to that close-up, okay, I really do think that the studio did a fan service shot just for kicks, just cuz, you know, because we see this picture right here. We see a full frontal view of the pink fairy's ass. I don't know if they were really trying to do that. I don't know if that was done intentionally, or, you know, I don't know. I thought it was funny. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, no. I had to go back. I was like, are you seriously telling me right now that they really just tried to get a fan service shot in really quick? Like, I'm like, why? Honestly, I just thought it was funny. Now, regarding Isidro within this episode, it does seem as though he was very, very disappointed within himself. I mean, we really didn't have to hear it from him saying that, you know, he couldn't do anything, but we could tell from his body language throughout basically the entirety of this episode. He was clenching his fist, he was looking at Serpico and Guts in awe as they were taking on their respective enemies, and you know, he just sat there and couldn't do anything. And he also saw Shireki, you know, which is also another child of, you know, technically his same age, or close enough, and she is actually being very useful to the group. And, you know, we saw him look at her, you know, like in awe. And to see that he technically can't do anything, he has completely lost, you know, all hope within himself. But we also have Morgan at the end of the episode motivating Isidro, which is good. So he's, you know, Morgan's serving a purpose. I mean, he's not a huge character, but he's serving a purpose to actually motivate Isidro to keep on moving forward, because someday, maybe, you will be as great as, you know, the Black Swordsman. That's technically what he's kind of insisting at, and that's where, of course, we see, you know, Isidro start to, you know, get energetic again and whatnot, and he also receives another dagger, which is kind of cool. Well, actually, this one looks more like a sword, not a dagger, excuse me. But from what we saw within that episode, long story short, this leaves room for Isidro's character development. And of course, by the end of this episode, Casca and Farnese get swept away by the flood that Shireki caused, and they're still alive, but trolls are now keeping them hostage, and it seems like they are leading them down to a troll hideout, back to the forest in whence they came. So, next episode, we're gonna see, you know, Guts and the rest of the gang end up, you know, trying to find them, obviously. However, after that episode, next week's episode, 2 weeks from now, let's just say 2 weeks from now, since it's easier that way. 2 weeks from now, okay, that is when I'm pretty sure we'll be able to see the Berserker Armor. Yo, I am so stuck, because I went back and looked at the manga and I was like, you know, how far away are we until the Berserker Armor? We're already, technically by next week, we will be past volume 25, I believe, and also maybe halfway in between it as well. So the next episode after next week's episode would showcase the Berserker Armor. Hopefully, if my judgment is correct. But definitely things are getting hype. I'm excited. I'm excited for that shit. So, yeah, I hope you guys are as well. Honestly, I thought this was a good episode. I try to give my overall, you know, personal opinions about the episode, what I liked and what I disliked, as well as, you know, keying in on the main plot points from what we can gather in this episode. I mean, technically the summary of this episode was the power of magic, but it also showed us various other things that are advancing along the plot when it comes to Berserk, and what we can expect later down the line. So, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on what you thought about my review, as well as what did you think about this episode in general. Do you still think last week's episode of Berserk was better, or do you think that this one definitely takes the cake as one of the best that we've had when it comes to, you know, the adaptation, at least. Just let me know your overall thoughts in the comments down below. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that red subscribe button down below if you are new to the channel and you want to see more from me. And that about does it for this video, guys. Thank you all for watching. I will catch you all in the next one.